Welcome to Magic Arcanum, I'm Ryan Gomez. Behind the scenes is Nicole Burdick, and we're so glad you're here because it's story time. Phyrexia, All Will Be One, brings the Gatewatch right to the Devil's doorstep as they attempt to stop Elesh Norn from spreading her glistening oil across the multiverse. A lot happens in this set, stuff that will have a far-reaching impact on the Magic story, I am sure, and it all builds upon events we have seen in the past year, including Dominaria United and the Brothers' War. For the sake of keeping this video at a watchable length, I have to assume you are already familiar with the sets I just mentioned, and if you are not, I've got recaps for them available on this channel, so go watch those first if you need to. I also want to stress that while I will cover all of the major happenings in the main story and call out the related story spotlight cards from the set itself, I obviously cannot discuss every little detail here, and that's what the comment section is for. If you've got a favorite moment or a bit I didn't get to mention, tell me about it down below. With that said, get ready to pour one out for some of the game's most iconic characters as I tell you what happens in Phyrexia, All Will Be One. The story starts with Kaito, the Wanderer, and Nahiri arriving on New Phyrexia and immediately having problems. Nahiri explains to a dazed Kaito that either the Phyrexians knew the planeswalkers were all coming, or they were just a bunch of paranoid monsters, but either way, they put up some sort of planar shield that they all slammed into upon arrival. This scattered the strike team, and it's affecting the Wanderer, who is having more trouble than usual holding herself on the plane, which is our first story spotlight card, Planar Disruption. As a reminder, spotlight cards are cards from the set that have a special identifying line of text across the bottom, telling us that these cards depict key moments from the actual story. But there are occasionally contradictions, we'll say. None yet, though. Anyway, Nahiri fights off a Phyrexian creature and suffers only a small scratch in the battle. Yeah, that is as bad as it sounds, because an open wound caused by a Phyrexian is certainly going to lead to an infection from their glistening oil, and that is what will happen to Nahiri, though she refuses to believe it, at least for now. With the immediate danger clear, the trio decides they need to press on to the furnace layer and try to reunite with the rest of the strike team. They march through the monumental facade and come across Tyvar, who at first attacks them in confusion, before laughing it off by declaring that heroes always clash when they first meet. I mean, he's not wrong. A short while later, the Wanderer loses her grip on the plane and vanishes, which returns the group to 3 members, who then come across a Mirren survivors' encampment. They are greeted by Melira, who confirms Koth is waiting for everyone down in the furnace layer, so she escorts them down through the Mirex. If the layout of this plane is confusing to you, I've got a video covering all of that too, so go watch that one if you haven't already. Around this time, Nahiri realizes her wound is now growing a bony protuberance, and her blood is looking more and more like oil, and she's getting really bad headaches, but she decides she's going to carry the group as far as she can and not make them worry about her, so she keeps this all to herself. While that time bomb continues to tick, the story cuts over to Elspeth and her arrival on the plane. She is immediately attacked by Phyrexians and is about to be overrun when she is saved by Kaya, who also happened to crash land nearby. Elspeth checks Kaya for wounds, and the story makes it clear here that every known cure for Phyrexian infection is rare, costly, or both. Elspeth even admits that she has Halo, but not a lot of it, and it hasn't been tested in the field. She's not entirely sure it would save Kaya if she was tagged in this first scuffle. So Elspeth is relieved to see Kaya is fine, and the two make their way down to the furnace layer where they are met by Koth. Koth and Elspeth are iconic members of the Resistance, now reunited after nearly a decade, so it's nice to see this captured in another story spotlight. Also present is Tyvar, Kaito, and Nahiri, and Jace, who apparently landed alone and found his way to the rally point solo. Jace explains that the psychic communication link he had established with everyone back on Dominaria was destroyed by the planar shield here on New Phyrexia, which makes it impossible to really tell if anyone else is still out there or will be able to reach the Mirren base camp. Realizing that their Phyrexian hosts were more prepared for their arrival than they had expected, Jace also concludes that they probably don't have as much time as they had hoped, and so he is eager to move forward with the plan rather than sit around and wait to see if anyone else shows up. That plan, by the way, is to activate the Filigree Silex, which they believe will destroy Realmbreaker before the Phyrexians can use it to pierce the Blind Eternities and grant themselves interplanar travel. Melira is conflicted. She wants to save Mirrodin and is willing to do whatever it takes, but she fears the Silex will destroy the whole plane along with the Realmbreaker tree, and Jace is unable to promise her that it won't. He can only tell her that based on what they know from their own experiences and what they know about the structure of New Phyrexia and the relative location of Realmbreaker down in the seed core, the plane should be able to survive the Silex. This is good enough for Melira, who then offers up Hex Gold to whoever can make use of it. This is a rare metal that offers some protection against Phyrexian infection, but it does not make you immune. It only buys you some time. Kaito uses some Hex Gold to coat his sword, and even Himoto, his companion drone, while Tyvar takes a piece to carry with him. Holding it will allow him to transmute his body into Hex Gold, at least for as long as his mana holds out. Meanwhile, Melira corners Nahiri and confronts her about the wound. Melira explains that she can probably still cure Nahiri, but the process will leave the planeswalker incapacitated for days. Melira asks if the rest of the team can complete this mission without her, and Nahiri says they cannot. So she is going to tough it out, and if she survives the battle ahead, Melira will then attempt to heal her after. With everyone ready to go, Melira explains that they will use a prepared shortcut to bypass the Hunter Maze and the Surgical Bay and land right in the Dross Pits. From there, they will have to make their way down through the Basilica, where hopefully Elesh Norn and her forces will be distracted by Urabrask and his rebellion, because otherwise, they're all dead on arrival. So, Koth, Melira, and the Planeswalkers take a little minecart ride down to the Dross Pits, where they are told the very air here will kill you if you breathe it in for too long. It won't turn you into a Phyrexian, though. It's just straight up regular toxic. Hooray for small miracles, I guess. Elspeth decides this is the time to break out the halo, and she opens a bag containing a few vials of the precious liquid. Everyone in the group does their shot, and then Jace falls to the ground, convulsing. After a few frantic moments, he gets back up and tries to walk off away from the group. He is stopped by Tyvar, who asks Jace where he thinks he's going, and Jace says the halo cleared his head enough that he was able to hear Vraska somewhere nearby and in a lot of pain. So now, Jace is dead set on finding and rescuing Vraska, and even offers to go do it himself, except Nahiri points out he's the one carrying the Silex, which they still need to complete this mission. We are now playing Resident Evil 4, escorting Ashley through zombie-infested territory, because the group decides to follow Jace and hopefully add Vraska back to their team, rather than have Jace hand over the Silex and then get lost in the Dross Pits alone. Thankfully, Urabrask's rebel forces have started their own insurrection, and Elspeth watches in horror as creatures she recognizes as being former Mirrens slaughter each other all around her. This provides enough distraction for the Planeswalkers that they are able to follow Jace as he zeroes in on Vraska's psychic cry for help. She is, of course, waiting in Shieldred's Colosseum, badly wounded and surrounded by dead Mirrens and petrified Phyrexians, with more on the way. Jace charges ahead, eager to rescue his love and trusting his own illusion magic to keep himself invisible to the arena full of Phyrexians, while every other planeswalker curses under their breath and realizes how profoundly screwed up this is. Nahiri tells Kaya to stay back, since she is the only replacement they have for Jace if he should fall here. Remember, Kaya sorta knows how the Sylex works because she was connected to Teferi when he learned about it through the temporal anchor, which does make her valuable to this mission. Everyone else rolls up their sleeves and fights their way to Vraska, who then tells Jace it is too late and she is sorry for signaling him because now she feels guilty he's actually here. Jace says, "Don't worry about it. We've got Melira and Halo. We can fix you." And Melira is like, "Yeah, actually, no. She's pretty far gone, dude. Nothing even I can do is going to help at this point." Nahiri offers Vraska a mercy killing so she doesn't have to endure being turned into a Phyrexian, and Jace says, absolutely not. He wants to spend every possible moment he can with his queen. Kaya says, "Hey, that's your choice. Stay as long as you want, but you're not staying with the Sylex." So she grabs that, and then all the other planeswalkers run for the exit. Vraska begs Jace to leave too, but he won't hear it. Instead, he uses his powers to create an illusion. It's Ravnica on a perfect day. The two take in all of the sights and imagine what their life could have been like together if only the multiverse had been a little kinder. It's a very sweet moment, but it is suddenly interrupted by Vraska stabbing Jace. The illusion breaks, and Jace realizes he can't ignore the reality of the situation any longer. He is now infected too, and Vraska says, "For the glory of Phyrexia," still smiling as she was within the illusion. She laughs as he runs and tries to reconnect with the others, who were in the process of turning around and coming back into the arena. Turns out there were far too many Phyrexians piled up waiting for them outside, and they were unable to make any progress that way. Vraska is still doing her evil laugh as the group realizes they're all about to die here, when Nahiri says, "The mission only goes forward if we move on, so you're all moving on. Hold on to something." She uses her considerable lithomancer powers to create a story spotlight and force the Colosseum itself down into the ground, puncturing the floor of the dross pits and ripping through the ceiling of the basilica just below. There is a jarring crash as everything falls into the next layer, and when the dust settles, Nahiri and Vraska are gone, but everyone else is more or less alive and intact. Elspeth landed on the satchel that was carrying the last of their halo, and she discovers her fall crushed all of the bottles, and there is nothing left. Nevertheless, the group knows they cannot let Nahiri's sacrifice go to waste, and so they pick themselves up and head out. They talk as they walk, each observing different horrors here in Elesh Norn's stronghold, and they discuss their chances of success now that they've lost Nahiri and are likely soon going to lose Jace, who has convinced Kaya to give him back the Sylex because he really wants to be the one to set it off now that this battle with the Phyrexians is personal. This is the closest I'll ever come to identifying with Jace, actually. Anyway, Melira describes what she has seen of Realmbreaker. She's the only one who's been able to get close to it without dying, and Tyvar confirms that the reason the branches look like they are underwater to her is because they are opening omen paths, which we know are passageways that can connect different planes. Eventually, the group reaches Elesh Norn's throne room, but it is empty. It seems everyone is focused on the battle raging overhead, where Urabrask's forces are still providing a massive distraction and giving the planeswalkers a chance to do their thing. The throne room has a stairway down to the Mycosynth Gardens, and so everyone keeps moving, eager to get this over with. Finally, they come to a sort of living tunnel covered in, I'll just say gross stuff, but it's all dripping with oil. They decide they have to pass through it, and so Tyvar uses his transmutation powers to briefly turn everyone into living hex gold as they pass through the tunnel, and then Kaito uses his telekinesis to remove any residual glistening oil before Tyvar's magic runs out. It's a neat way to combine their abilities and keep things feeling magic as we move into the final sphere, the Seed Core, where Tyvar is awestruck at the Phyrexian version of his beloved world tree. Koth notes that there are invasion ships already parked in the upper branches, which means the Phyrexians are dangerously close to accessing the multiverse. The group makes a mad dash for the base of the tree, but as they run, there is a blinding flash of rainbow lights, and they realize they are too late. The tree has pierced the Blind Eternities, and the invasion has begun. Tyvar refuses to accept defeat and convinces the group they might still be able to do something to stop this. Jace agrees, but says whatever it is, it's gotta be fast. So they resume their run to the tree. At the base of the tree is a small opening which leads into a room within the tree's massive trunk, and inside there we find the dismembered pieces of Karn. Karn's head is surprised to see everyone, but tells them it's too late, especially because the Silex was already destroyed, thinking of the one back on Dominaria. Elspeth tells Karn they have another, and they think they can still end this, but they're not sure how. Karn instructs them to take their Silex down into the root system of the tree, and fortunately this room has another opening that leads there. So the planeswalkers go, while Koth and Malira stay behind with Karn. On their way to the roots, the group is stopped by Ajani and Tybalt. Ajani is wearing armor of white porcelain that appears to be growing out of his own body, and he is delighted to see his old friend Elspeth, who he casually invites to join the glory of Phyrexia. Tybalt has also been made complete, right down to his little devil tail, which is now split in two all the way to the base, and is tipped with a pair of wicked-looking stingers. Elspeth and Tyvar square off to face their respective foes, and Tyvar commands Kaito to get Jace and Kaya safely to the roots of the tree with the Silex, or this will all be for nothing. To his credit, Kaito does get Kaya and Jace to their target, even as Jace's stab wound is starting to fill up with wires and drip oil. Jace calmly unpacks the Silex and sits down among the roots of Realmbreaker when Kaya tells him to stop for a second and think about what they're doing. Her concern is that the tree has already pierced the Blind Eternities, and thus the shockwave from detonating the Silex could travel into other planes and have unforeseen consequences. She even reminds Jace that the original Silex, used by Urza, went so far as to break time itself. So there's really no telling what happens if they use it here, now, plugged into so many worlds at once. Jace figures it doesn't really matter. If the tree has already connected to those worlds, then so have the Phyrexians, and thus those worlds are pretty much forfeit no matter what they do, so they might as well take out the tree and as much of the invasion army as they can while it's right here in front of them. Kaito realizes Jace is talking about sacrificing everything, including Kamigawa, which might not even be infected yet, and that doesn't sit well with him. Jace says, "Look, I would love to spend all day explaining to you how we don't need to be heroes here, just saviors, but we are out of time. Every moment we talk, I get closer to becoming a Phyrexian myself, and you guys do not want to face me like that." Which I think is a bit of a bluff, but sometimes Jace does pull off some stone-cold moves, like making people forget how to breathe, so I guess it is possible he could eliminate both Kaya and Kaito himself. Anyway, Kaya still likes her odds. She pulls out her glowing purple daggers, and Kaito stands beside her, saying he cannot let Jace destroy Kamigawa. Jace says, "Very well then," and sets the Silex down and stands up to face his former allies. The story cuts back and forth between the outside battle with Ajani, Elspeth, Tyvar, and Tybalt, and the inside battle with Jace, Kaito, and Kaya, just to keep things dramatic and suspenseful for a little while. Eventually, though, Tyvar gets his hands on Tybalt's tails and uses them to skewer Tybalt, and then toss him off a bridge. Elspeth lands a solid hit on the back of Ajani's neck with the hilt of her sword, which knocks the big cat out but doesn't kill him. Elspeth then runs off to join Jace and the others, so the story jumps back to them. Jace has used his illusions to distract Kaya and Kaito while he triggered the Silex. He fills the supremely powerful magical artifact with all of his grief and fury. He thinks of the suffering and agony of Mirrodin. He thinks of his love for Vraska. He thinks of his regret for the entire multiverse, and he lets it all flow into the bowl, thick as honey. He even repeats the same phrase Urza used with the original Silex. Wipe the land clear, bring the ending. At that moment, Elspeth enters the room and realizes what is happening. In one swift move, she plunges her sword through Jace and takes the Silex into her own hands before planeswalking away. Now, the story says she went to, quote, some unknown destination, some point beyond the Blind Eternities. But the story spotlight card makes it sound like she went into the Eternities itself. What's the difference? Well, if she took the Silex to a plane, then that plane could still be destroyed or changed. But if she took it to the space between planes, it's possible nothing would happen. Or maybe she's dead now. The story doesn't really tell us, and the card's language makes it even more unclear. So, leave your speculations down in the comments. Tyvar shows up, and Kaya laments that the Silex is gone, Elspeth is gone, the invasion has begun, and they have lost. So just when it seems things can't get worse, a door opens, and in steps Elesh Norn with an honor guard of Phyrexians. She invites the 3 remaining planeswalkers to join her as Jace's body stands back up and shambles over to her side. Kaya, Kaito, and Tyvar each give her a colorful reply, and Elesh Norn says, well, why not? We've already got so many of your friends here. That's when Tamiyo steps forward, followed by Nahiri, and finally Nissa. Yeah, Nissa got completed in one of the side stories, which I will cover in a separate video, but that does add to the shock value of her appearing here. Surrounded by her loyal pets, Elesh Norn confidently declares, all will be one. But if these 3 would rather be enemies, so be it. The Praetor gives the signal to attack, and that's where it ends. To recap, a Planeswalker strike team arrives on New Phyrexia, but the plane is ready for them, and their landings are scattered. Most manage to find their way to the rally point, but some suffer wounds. They press deeper and deeper into the layered spheres of the plane, with Jace taking a detour to rescue Vraska, and Nahiri sacrificing herself to move the group forward. They encounter Karn and Ajani and Tybalt, and debate the merits of using the Silex after realizing they are already too late to stop the Phyrexian invasion of the multiverse. Elspeth jumps on the grenade that is the lit Silex. Jace falls and joins Nissa, Tamiyo, and Nahiri at the right hand of Elesh Norn, and Kaito, Kaya, and Tyvar are all that remains of the failed strike team as things fade to black. And that's it! That's what happens in Phyrexia. All will be one. Now that you know all of the major beats, we can get on with the fun stuff in a little segment I like to call Mustache Minute. Ready? Here we go. Let's talk spotlight cards. Most of them lined up pretty well with the events from the story, but there was one I couldn't place, and that is Urabrask's Forge. We never actually go there in the story, and the card has no flavor text or anything to justify it being a spotlight card. As far as I can tell, this is just supposed to represent Urabrask joining the rebellion and creating the distraction necessary for our heroes to sneak through the Basilica. Also, I didn't get to talk about it earlier, but Urabrask wasn't entirely alone in that ploy. A few of the Black Thanes, including Shieldred, actually sided with Urabrask and against Elesh Norn. The Thanes are already known for infighting, and it seems like at least some of them figure they stand a better chance at being in full control if they oppose Elesh Norn. There are plenty of other named legendary cards in the set who do not appear in the story, but a few do at least get name dropped. That includes Thrun, a troll who gets credited for creating a tunnel used by the Planeswalkers, even though he himself is never seen, and Atraxa, who guards the Basilica, but is busy fighting Urabrask's forces and thus never engages with the Gatewatch. We never see any of the horrors from the Dominus cycle, and perhaps most curiously, we never cross paths with Venser, which seems like a missed opportunity since he would have changed the meaning of the Resistance's reunion considerably. Despite that, there was a lot I liked about this story, starting with the overall tone. Things feel dire right from the first paragraph of the first chapter. The world itself feels alien and threatening. Kaito almost gets killed by sand on page 1, and things only get more dangerous from there. I had a lump in my throat the entire time I was reading because I knew bad things were gonna happen, and the main characters would be powerless to stop it. Now, some of that might be thanks to how previews were handled, and we were already told a handful of Planeswalkers would get completed. But some of it I still attribute to the writing, which delivered a story full of intense moments. However, fitting the main story into just 5 chapters forced the creative team to make some questionable decisions about what to spin off into the 5 side stories. Nissa and Luca both fall to the Phyrexians in one such story, and the Wanderer reappears here trying to catch up with Kaito and the rest of the strike team, which is an odd mix of major events and feels like it deserves to be part of the main thread. I am also somewhat unsatisfied with the conclusion of the main story because there are several things left unresolved. Now, I know what a cliffhanger is, everyone. I majored in communications and took many classes on script writing and storytelling. But things like Koth and Malira being left in a room with Karn and we have no idea what happened to them, that's bad. Elspeth grabbing the Silex and just vanishing, that's also bad. Saving reveals like this for March of the Machine doesn't leave me in suspense, it's just annoying. Let me compare it to The Empire Strikes Back, which ends on a similar note, right? The good guys lose. Han is frozen. Luke is shocked to learn Darth Vader is his father, and he suffers the loss of his hand. We don't know how our heroes can recover from this, but the movie still ends with a plan. We know where everyone is, even if we don't know their status. Chewie and Lando are going to take the Falcon, Luke will meet up with them on Tatooine, and we, as the audience, aren't sure of their chances, but we at least know what to expect from the next chapter of the story. Phyrexia All Will Be One doesn't really give us that. It just kind of freezes, with Elspeth and Koth in limbo, and our heroes in a locked room with the big bad. That is the kind of thing that happens in a Saturday morning cartoon right before the commercial break, not at the end of the middle set of your massive story arc. Overall, though, I was still pretty happy with things. I just wish they managed to stick that landing. It's interesting that by moving Nissa to a side story, we get Jace as the only member of the original Gatewatch on the strike team. I have to wonder if Liliana or Chandra being there would have changed his rescue attempt with Vraska, or if he was so blinded by love at that point that it wouldn't have mattered. Oh, and world-building wise, I've got 2 interesting bits here I want to highlight. First, at one point, Kaya and Kaito are talking about the lack of spirits. Kaya figures with so much death on this plane, the air should be thick with ghosts, or something. And looking at Realmbreaker, Kaito says, back on Kamigawa, we've got a big tree kind of like this, but it lives in harmony with everything around it, and it is a home to spirits as well. So they are struck by the sterile nature of the Phyrexian landscape and conclude that the Phyrexian process is so thorough that it leaves nothing behind, not even your spirit. The second bit comes from one of the side stories, which I will discuss in full in another video, but I want to touch on it here. It involves Tezzeret reflecting on how Tamio had most of her internal organs removed during surgery. This is further supported in the main story by Ajani, because his entire outer flesh seems to have grown into bony armor plates, leaving very little of his original body. I bring these things up because some people have speculated it would be possible to save the completed Planeswalkers and return them to their original states. To me, the story seems to be reiterating that this is not possible. The physical bodies are dramatically changed. In most cases, they have been almost or entirely replaced with synthetic parts. Not only are the original bodies modified beyond the ability to heal back to normal, even if you could, it would be an empty shell. Without Phyrexian oil coursing through the person, they would have nothing left to animate them. Their spirit seems to be gone. I don't think there are any miracle cures coming in the final chapters of this story. Melira repeatedly says even her best efforts don't always work. Elspeth was on the verge of tears when she realized the last of their halo supply had leaked out of the crushed vials. So all we can do is wait and see. But in the meantime, let me ask you this. Do you understand the story for Phyrexia All Will Be One? Did the spotlight cards do a good job of capturing the major events, including things like Shieldred and Urabrask launching an attack against Elesh Norn together? Are you left with a feeling of suspense as you try to anticipate what will happen in March of the Machine? Or are you frustrated by the lack of answers regarding characters like Elspeth and Koth? Let me know down in the comments, and then make sure you like this video and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the great stories you'll only find here on Magic Arcanum. We'll see ya!